morning, everyone.
I know.
I have a light gavel tonight because it's a very quiet crowd, and you're all sitting ready for the meeting to start, so very good. I'm Maria Mark. I'm president of Beaches Watch. Welcome to our March meeting. Happy St. Patty's March. May? Month? Yeah. So we are excited to have Lisa Rinaman here, your St. John's Riverkeeper, and she's going to be speaking in just a few minutes as soon as I go through these announcements. I think the list, although I think I see it. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm back. So we do record our meetings, and it will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow at Beaches Watch 2012, as well as a link on our website, beacheswatch.com. We are a membership organization, so we're always looking for members to either join us for the first time or renew your membership. And it's $15 for individual, $20 for family, and $5 for students. And this is for the calendar year, January through December. You may renew or join tonight. Ladies at the front at the desk will be glad to take your membership or donation, or you can go online at beacheswatch.com. So we will recognize our elected officials. Thank you for coming. We have Sandy Golding, who is our Jacks Beach City Council. And we have Candace Kelly, who is Atlantic Beach City Commissioner. The legislative session is still in session through March 13th. If you want to stay informed, I know that the property tax is our biggest issue this year coming up, but you can go to localvoicesunited.com and you can get the latest updates on where these bills are as far as committee, if they're ready to go to the floor, if they're ready to go to vote. So that will keep you in the know about that. We are taking applications for our Flan Sharp Memorial Scholarship for Fletcher High School. So if you have any students who are seniors, any friends who their children are seniors and they are looking to apply for a scholarship, we highly encourage you to invite them to apply for Beaches Watch. It's a $1,000 scholarship. And the deadline is March 31st. So going back to our meeting we had 2 months ago, was defunding our cities, and this is talking about specifically how the property tax cuts could affect our local services. So you can see that meeting, that video on our YouTube channel, and also the presentation, 2026 property tax presentation. So I would encourage all of you, if you missed the meeting, to just tune in and see what it's a lot of really good information. It really gives you an insight on how our city budgets really work and how our different services are funded. So it's a good behind the scenes and informative video. Our next meeting will be April 1st, which is, I know, April Fool's Day, but this is not Fool's Day. We're actually going to have a State of Our Schools address, and our guest speakers will be Dr. Christopher Berner from our Duval School Superintendent, and then April Carney, who is our board representative. And that will be here at the Beaches Library on, as I said, Wednesday, April 1st at 7 o'clock. So, a few hands, but how did you hear about tonight's meeting? Just by show of hands. The Digital Beaches Leader announcement? No. Facebook? Our newsletter. Okay. The online email, Jacksonville Today, and they do a really good job posting everything that's going on locally. Our website, and just by talking to your neighbors, friends, family. Okay, very good. So we will now turn our program over to Lisa Rinaman to talk about our 2026 State of the St. John's River Report, and we will have Q&A to follow. So.
We just celebrated 25 years of being an organization to protect the St. John's, and it's been my honor to serve as our third Riverkeeper for the last 13 years. But we still have a lot of work to do, as we'll talk about tonight, and I look forward to joining you all to protect the future of Florida waters for future generations. It is our mission to defend the St. John's River and advocate for its protection, and that's more than just the river itself. The river is it's a big river. It also has many tributaries as well as springs. There's 100 freshwater springs that provide fresh water to the St. John's. And so we work to protect all the waterways within the St. John's. We're a member of Waterkeeper Alliance. That's a formal alliance of more than 350 waterkeepers around the world. The first Riverkeeper was the Hudson Riverkeeper, and now we have 15 Riverkeepers in the state of Florida, and we organized formally in 2018 as Waterkeepers Florida to make sure we had a voice at the state level, because a lot of decisions to help or hurt our waterways are made in Tallahassee, so we wanted to make sure we had a statewide voice for all of Florida waterways. But this is the St. John's River watershed. As you can see, it's more than 8,800 square miles, so it's really big. The river begins down in Indian River County, where you see the blue star, and it begins its 310-mile journey through the headwaters, which make up Brevard County, Osceola, Indian River County. That red star, is important too, because the river bottom is below sea level all the way down to the red star. And so sea level rise impacts, while there are coastal issues, which I know is all top of mind for everyone that lives at the beaches, there's also inland impacts to sea level rise. The green star is where the Ocklawaha River meets the St. John's, and that's the beginning of the 100-mile estuary. And we're seeing sea level rise impacts nearly 100 miles inland. There are impacts already from rising waters. One of the most unique things about the St. John's is not that it flows north. There's actually many rivers that flow north, but it's the more unique thing, it only drops in elevation 27 feet over its 310-mile journey. So it's a very lazy river, and so when bad things go into the St. John's, it tends to stick around a little bit longer because there's a longer residency time. It's also tidally influenced further inland, so things slosh around a lot. And so there are lots of challenges, but more importantly, there's lots of wonderful features and great places to go visit to enjoy the St. John's, some of Florida's most beautiful spaces. We were founded back 25 years ago for one purpose only. People came together from different walks of life, whether they were fishermen, crabbers, riverfront homeowners, concerned citizens, about harmful blue-green algal blooms. Based on the River Report, there's good news and there's bad news regarding algal blooms. The harmful algal blooms are actually driven by excess nitrogen or excess phosphorus in our waterways. We've seen a reduction after years of work of total nitrogen, so we're seeing some good things from nitrogen. The bad thing, we're seeing an increase in phosphorus, which is another type of nutrient that drives these blue-green algae outbreaks. So again, we have more work to do. Nutrient pollution comes from all different sources. It comes from wastewater discharge. When we send our sewage to wastewater treatment facilities, in their discharging, they do discharge, and they're allowed to, they're permitted to discharge the levels of nutrient pollution, or when they have overflows or leaky pipes, that adds to the problem. There's some, in the middle basin of the St. John's, there's some severe sewage spills coming from old infrastructure in Lake Monroe. In addition, septic tanks. We have too many septic tanks in the St. John's River watershed that are continuing to not only add bacteria to our waterways, but also excess nutrients. Also agriculture runoff. We have a lot of agriculture in the St. John's River watershed. There are some that are doing wonderfully well and using best management practices to reduce their nutrient footprint, but there's still too many that are having excess runoff. And part of it is like they want to do things the traditional way they've always done them for generations. So we're trying to work to make sure we're having those best management practices move forward to not only reduce their nutrient pollution footprint, but also their water consumption. And of course, we all could contribute to this problem if we use fertilizers unwisely. There are ways to use fertilizer, understanding what your soil knows, using less, only putting the right plants in the right place. I like to use native plants because that way you reduce your fertilizer needs and also your water needs. So there's wonderful river-friendly ways to have a beautiful yard and even save water, which we need to do more and more today since we're in drought conditions. A new source that we've been very concerned about of nutrient pollution and other contaminants is the land disposal of sewage sludge. You may hear of this practice as biosolids. Biosolids is a pretty word for highly concentrated human waste. And this is also commingled with industrial waste. So when we send our sewage to a wastewater treatment facility, they treat the sewage, they pull out all of the concentrated waste and solids, and then they are allowed to discharge either through reclaimed water, which you can put on your yards, or into a waterway. They have to dispose of this sludge somehow. You can see a picture there. This is a picture of a truck actually disposing of the sewage sludge on farmland in the headwaters of the St. Johns. This practice is allowed by EPA. There's different levels of treatment, but what we're seeing is this permitted source of nutrient pollution in the St. Johns. What is happening, they're permitting this sludge to go on farmland as fertilizer. The problem is this concentrated human waste has much more nutrients than what the farmland needs for the crops, and so we're seeing a significant runoff into the headwaters of the St. Johns. The reason we're having such a high volume of this material trucked to the St. Johns River is this practice was banned in 2007 by the Florida legislature. And so South Florida has been sending their sewage sludge and biosolids to the headwaters of the St. Johns. And we're seeing a significant increase in phosphorus, which luckily is being studied, and we're seeing that it is a serious condition in some areas. It increased more than 18% over just last year. But unfortunately, this practice still exists. Good news is there was legislation just passed by during this session of the legislature that will ban this practice, but it will allow class AA biosolids, which is a little bit, it's better, it's treated a little bit more to get the pathogens out and heavy metals, but it still has the nutrient problem, and it's not regulated at all at this time. And so if we are getting rid of the worst of the worst, this should reduce the impact in 2028 when it goes into effect, but now we need to focus on making sure that we're not just playing whack-a-mole and taking care of this issue and creating another. And what's really frustrating about this is not only is it a pollution issue, it's a significant economic issue and health threat. So we partner with the Public Trust for Conservation to use the best science, the best law to figure out what we can do to try to prevent this sooner than later. And we actually hired an economist to do a study of the cost. If you have real dollars and cents tied to something, it tends to get more notice with the legislature. And based on just the nutrient pollution costs, it's a transfer of $1.12 billion cleanup liability from South Florida to North Florida and through the St. Johns River watershed. And this is just the nutrient pollution. It doesn't account for the other contaminants from this practice. So bad news is this happened to our river. It's going to take a long time to clean it up. The good news is there is legislation that will correct this practice by 2028. But the bad news is there could be unintended consequences if we don't figure out a way to regulate and truly find a sustainable, equitable way to deal with our growing volume of human waste. Right now, Florida's growing by 1,000 people per day, so we're getting more sewage than less. And so we need to make sure we have a long-term, sustainable way to deal with this. Throughout Duval County in particular, we do have a significant issue with fecal coliform from sewage issues in our tributaries. Of the 60 tributaries in Duval County alone, 57 of them are impaired for excess fecal coliform bacteria from whether it's failing septic tanks, it could be wastewater infrastructure. In some cases, it could be pet waste. It could be rookeries from bird habitat. One of the challenges is while the city does testing as well as the beaches and JEA, no one has enough capacity to do enough sampling to truly get to the root causes and the sources of this contamination. And it's been a chronic issue that the River Report and others have been documenting for more than a decade. So we wanted to figure out a way, how can we target one of the troubled tributaries in a really meaningful way and complement what the city of Jacksonville is doing as well as other agencies. So we brought together a team that goes out into the River and Moncrief Creeks every single month, looking for fecal bacteria at 10 different sites to see if we can track that and determine what the sources is to complement what the city does. The city is really spread out on their sampling, and so we're looking at doing a concentrated effort in this this small sub-watershed in a way that we can pilot it and do it in other areas. And this has led to new relationships with community organizations. We've started cleaning up parks and working with the community. There's so many riverfront parks along this waterway. And we've even started a resiliency project where we're building vertical oyster gardens and putting them on the different docks on the River River and tracking the oysters that come on board. We actually have a team of scientists from Jacksonville University to go out and track what's happening with these oysters. We're actually seeing recruitment and growth, and of course the more oysters you get, the better water filtration you get. We also did a hardened shoreline with these POSH modules where you took old oyster shells and actually put them to create an artificial reef on the trout river outside of a park. And the neighborhood got so excited about this, now they have an annual oyster fest. It's going to be April 18th along the Trout River, and we'd love for you to come out and enjoy some fresh oysters as well as see the progress of some of the resiliency work along the River. Other things we track besides pollution in the St. Johns River and the tributaries are the health of our submerged aquatic vegetation and the wetlands in the St. John's watershed. And unfortunately, we continue to lose both of these very important features of our river in a dramatic fashion and need to do something, because these grasses are not only beautiful to look at, they're really important to the health of the St. John's and all the things a river should be providing our community. When you lose submerged grasses in particular, you lose important habitat. The nurseries in the St. Johns River estuary are those submerged grasses. And so it's the basis and the foundation for our thriving commercial industry, fishing industry, as well as recreational fisheries. So it's real important to bring that habitat back. These grasses are the kidneys of the river. So if you lose these grasses, you have less filtration of the contaminants and pollution going in, so you'll have more toxic blue-green algae outbreaks. Hurricane Irma, when it hit in 2017, that was a real wake-up call for all of us in Duval County, as well as Clay County, with historic flooding along Black Creek and downtown Jacksonville. But one thing we didn't anticipate, that after Hurricane Irma, the higher water and darker water lasted way upstream in the entire St. Johns River estuary for several years. In fact, we're only starting recently to see those waters starting to go back down. And part of that's because we're in a drought, so we're not sure what's going to happen is when we get the rainfall back. As a result of that storm, we lost nearly 90% of the submerged aquatic vegetation in the lower St. Johns River estuary. So that 100-mile stretch from the Ocklawaha all the way up to Duval County. And everyone thought it would come back because the grasses have recuperated after storms historically, but even today they haven't come back. And so we were concerned about what's going on. The agencies have a lot of data and information over the years they've collected, but there wasn't a real public-facing forward conversation, and we really wanted to change that because our phones started ringing more and more about when are these grasses going to come back. So we wanted to supplement what the agencies were doing, and we actually launched in 2023 our Save Our Rivers Grasses Expedition, where we actually selected an 80-mile stretch of this St. Johns River from Doctor's Lake all the way upriver to Lake George. And we picked these sites to go to look to see, are there grasses? Do they exist? If they do exist, what do they look like? How do they met? What are they? How tall are they? How dense are they? What type of grass is there? And also to take water quality data. One of the things the agencies are currently doing is they don't take water quality data at the same place they're taking the submerged aquatic vegetation data. All of the measurements we do, we use the same protocols the agencies use so we can compare our data with their data since there's a longer record. And here's our stretch of river. All of those little points are the different points where we collected 3 years worth of data. And we literally go by boat because we want to highlight the connectivity, and we meet with the homeowners. Every one of these spots is a residential dock because we want to build those relationships. On average, the folks that live in these houses have been there for more than 20 years, so they have a wonderful record of memory of their relationship and what the river looked like behind them. And when we get there, we take water quality, we jump in, and we actually have a transect, or a 10-meter long rope that we put in the same spot every single time, and we measure each meter to find if there's grass. The good news, there is grass, we're finding it. The bad news, it's only about this tall. And the grasses should be about this tall. They should be topping out over the water, and we're not seeing that. So the good news is the grass can grow. There have been some spots it is growing, trying to figure out what that means. The more important thing is collecting data, talking to the homeowners, talking to scientists, and talking to the agencies about what we can do. Here's a picture of some of those baby grasses, what we're seeing. And what you probably can't see from where you're sitting, there's little bite marks on each of the end of those grasses. And so the grasses are succumbing to grazing pressure. So wildlife that enjoys eating these grasses are eating them before they can grow. We don't believe there's been an explosion of turtles or manatees or anything that likes to eat the grass. We think something else is going on, and that's what we're trying to figure out. In 2025, last year, we added 10 protected enclosures. This is an experiment the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission was doing, and we saw good results, and so we wanted to do more of this in more places, where we actually put a fence. We built a fence in the river. We actually are just to keep wildlife out. So we're just reducing the amount of grazing pressure in a very limited area, not to starve anyone. We don't want to starve them. We're not proposing this as a solution, but it gives us more data and more information. And what we're finding is the grass is growing to historic levels inside the enclosure. So the good news is it can grow. It can grow under current conditions. The bad news is it's not growing outside the enclosures. It's still getting nibbled down to the quick. So one of the theories is that there's multiple water quality stressors that have slowed down the growth of these grasses enough that it's succumbing to grazing pressure. But more information needs to be gathered, obviously. One of the things we just found this last week, we went out to test the integrity of the fences to see if they're ready for the growing season. We're also seeing an abundance of freshwater sponges that are growing inside the facility, inside the enclosures, but not outside. So we're working with some freshwater sponge experts to come look at those and see what they can mean for us. The interesting thing of these sponges, they can filter, their filter capacity is 100,000 times greater than their biomass. So they're really great for water quality. The bad news is they're not growing outside the fence as well. So it just gives us more information, more teams of scientists to come together. I also want to give out a plug for St. John's Water Management District, River Water Management District. They actually held an SAB roundtable this past December. The first public meeting I know of SAB. We're really excited about getting that out. And they elevated this issue in their strategic plan as part of their planning. So we're excited to have that sense of urgency from the districts as we move forward. This is an aerial of one of the first enclosures that was put in East Palatka off of Dancing Point. And that's not algae, that's all beautiful eelgrass that's popping out and demonstrating that it can grow in these waters. Unfortunately, this enclosure was breached in late 2024, and that grass was basically disappeared in about 3 days. And so it is the preferred diet of much wildlife, and since they're not getting it, it does attract them. But it can grow, but we just need to figure out a way to see if we can get it to grow more quickly. There's the longer grass, that's what we're seeing. This is in Orangedale. This is on the east bank, just north of Shands Bridge. And you can see that long, beautiful grass on the outside, and then the short one on the inside. So it is growing, it can grow, we just need to figure out how to pull together a way to boost the growth throughout the St. John's. Because again, we're not advocating to fence off the river. We actually have one legislator asking, so how much will it cost? We'll get some money to fence off the river. This is not a strategy. We don't want that to happen, because we want people to be able to fish in there, we want manatees to thrive, as well as everything else that lives in the St. John's. In addition to seeing that grass can grow, there are some concerning trends. We're seeing significant algal blooms. They're a little bit different than what we've experienced in the past. Historically, you see a lot of mats, that blue-green on the surface, and what we're seeing in several areas is there's suspended active harmful algal blooms in the water column, which is blocking light, and instead of that wonderful iced tea colored water, it almost looks like pea soup. And then that top picture, that's supposed to be white sand, and that's actually from the river bottom out of Lake George. And it had 5 different active types of cyanobacteria in the river sediments. And so we're concerned about what this is telling us, and this is persistent between Lake George and the town of Palatka. And so concerned that that part of the river may be at a tipping point. And again, this is right at the base where you have all of that upstream pollution. All of the nutrient pollution initiatives to reduce nutrient pollution in St. John's depend on a reduction in the headwaters, and that's where all the biosolids are coming right now. So we don't think this is coming from that far upriver yet, but we know it's not helping because we're seeing significant increases in algae. And in the enclosures in this area, we're not seeing the vibrant growth we're seeing in some other areas further downriver. So lots more to still understand, but the good news is that river can support grass, we just need to help it to do so. And one of the ways that we believe will actually help our struggling grasses, while it's not a silver bullet, it is something that can give a boost to the St. Johns River estuary, and that's reuniting the natural connection between Silver Springs, the Ocklawaha, and the St. Johns. In doing so, it'll restore the natural flow between Silver Springs, which is the largest freshwater spring in the St. Johns River, as well as it will free more than 20 springs that are currently drowned out between the pool, and will reduce evaporation loss, that we're losing water from that stagnant reservoir when it's actually filled. That free-flowing fresh water will help restore the St. Johns River estuary. It'll create more miles of habitat for wildlife and allow manatees to get up into Silver Springs, as well as all the migratory fish that depend on the aquatic to spawn. And it will restore and invigorate about 18,000 acres of forest and wetlands. Those wetlands are the best biocultures a river can have. On the fishery side, historically American eel was the largest economic driver, the largest commercial catch in Putnam County and Palatka, and this will help bring back American eel, American shad, striped bass, Atlantic sturgeon, all of these fish that depend on the Ocklawaha River to get up and to spawn. Right now you can catch some of these fish, they get to the dam and they can't get any further, so they're not reproducing like they historically would or could if the river is restored. And the University of Florida has studied this issue for more than 10 years, and they predict a significant economic boost with a 28% change in regional visitation, an $8.1 million economic input, as well as a significant return on the investment. And then this is just for restoration itself. But if you've been following this issue, you know this is a 50-year issue that's been at odds with people for it or against it, and butting heads and not getting any movement forward. But about 5 years ago, we started working in the community to try to change the conversation from what will be lost and what will be gained. And one of those ideas was looking at reimagining the dam. So there were many community meetings looking on what could you do to keep the dam, because there is actually a park there. You want to make it more of a vibrant destination park, but actually breach the dam where the river historically flowed. So you could turn the dam into an observation deck that you could go to by car, you could go to by boat, and actually see the forest returning, the springs returning, the river flowing, and you could actually take your boat all the way to Silver Springs from Jacksonville. This effort's been led now by a team of folks in Putnam and Marion counties. Linda Myers is the president of the Great Florida Riverways Trust. She's a former Putnam County tax collector as well as county commissioner. Chip Leibel is a former county commissioner in Putnam County as well. He's the vice president of the Great Florida Riverways Trust, and he was actually once a Save Rodman Dam president, but now he understands that this is part of a bigger system. It's not just about the pool, it's about this connectivity of Silver Springs, the other springs, the Ocklawaha, and the St. Johns. So they've been working very hard in Tallahassee. Representative Wyman Duggan sponsored the House bill, and it was voted on today and passed through the House. And Senator Brodeur has the Senate companion that we hope will be heard in the Senate in the next week week between now and next Thursday. If you'd like to help with this issue, we do have an opportunity to. One of the big differences with this bill, it's not just about restoration, it's not just about the environmental benefits, it also brings in significant recreational outdoor amenities, focusing on an outdoor committee that will bring together all the counties to come up with ways to invest in outdoor recreation, as well as economic revitalization and more resiliency for the communities in all the counties that are part of the Great Florida Riverway. If you would like to support this effort, you can sign up here by taking a picture of this QR code where I have information you can, on the table over here, you can take with you. And if you're on the fence, if you have questions about it, we'd love to visit with you. We actually spent all weekend at the Azalea Festival in Palatka, and we're finding more and more people just have questions. We actually did a poll back 2 years ago. We brought on a pollster that the governor would use if he used one, and 74% of people in Putnam County supported restoration, and 7% supported the dam and wanted us to leave it alone. But 17% were just undecided. They wanted more information. And so just bringing this to forefront, trying to bring the community together so we can celebrate all the economic, environmental benefits and get out in the water and fish all these fisheries and enjoy together. But with that, I just wanted to thank you all for inviting me here to talk a little about the river. I do have these river report cards. This is on the back table, and this gives you a snapshot of some of the things I talked about, as well as how we're doing, whether it's contaminants on the different fisheries. And this is the entire lower St. Johns River. There's a QR code on here and a website if you want to read the entire report, if you want to dig into some of the details on any of this issue. And I have business cards in the back as well if you want to talk about anything else that I haven't brought up. But now I want to turn it over to you. If you have any questions about anything I talked about, anything I didn't talk about, or any questions that you may have about our river or any of the waters in Florida. Maria, do you want to facilitate?
Okay, so I have the roaming microphone, although not a lot of people, but still want you to use it so everyone can hear your questions. Oh, here's my roaming microphone.
Okay, so in addition to us worrying about property taxes, we're all dealing with the effects of HB 60 and what do we do with the reclaimed water? So how does the river feel about that?
About reclaimed water?
Yeah.
There's a way to use reclaimed water in a good way, and there's a way to use it that doesn't help. One of the challenges with using reclaimed water is it already has a lot of nutrients in it, and you really don't need to use fertilizer if you're using reclaimed water. But I don't think that's getting out and about enough because it is already rich in nutrients. We are seeing some evidence that reclaimed water, there are significant runoff from reclaimed water use in some areas, especially on golf courses, and we think it is because the fertilizer is still being used. We've tried to get some public information out about that you don't need to use fertilizer, at least you should try not to and see how it works, but that messaging is not getting out there.
Hi, thanks for being here. If for no other reason, it's always great to hear a great speaker.
Oh, thank you.
I have to admit, I'm an ambivalent dam person. My son's a great bass fisherman, so that's the only angle I know on. But after the first part of your speech, I started thinking, if we open that up, does it not also open up all those places, the spring and all that, to all the pollution that we're now trying to fight? So I just didn't know if you had any comments on it.
Absolutely, and the water, the thing that's held this up, obviously it's been bass fishing against the environmentalists, but one of the things that held it up was the nutrient pollution concern, because there is, you could say that the pool behind the dam acts like a retention pond, and so it can filter out some of the nutrients that are coming down. However, if you had a free-flowing river, you have the about 8,000 additional acres of this forested wetlands. You have the twists and turns, the oxbows that drop out nutrient pollution as well. And so the Water Management District did a study in 2016 to see if it was permittable. Would the nutrient pollution be an issue? They projected there would be a slight increase in phosphorus initially, but that would work out over time and that could be mitigated. which that was a red flag, so we don't need more phosphorus. But what they didn't factor into that study was the filtration of the forested wetlands, and they didn't take in the oxbows and all the natural filtration that the river would provide. In addition to that, you get cooler, clearer water from the springs, so the water getting through to the river is more spring-like, and that helps the grasses downstream. So overall, looking at all those different benefits together, the whole team of scientists, many of them retired scientists, they've worked on this for decades, they believe it's actually going to have a significant increase in water quality benefits to the St. Johns River. Another thing it didn't factor in is they have to do a drawdown every, it used to be 3 to 4 years, now it's more like 4 to 5 years. And when they do that drawdown, there's a significant pollution plume out into the river when they do the drawdown because it's all festered and it's all being sent out. And right now they're starting to fill it back up. There's a big saltwater intrusion spike getting upstream, so you have that damage done to the drawdowns. So looking at all those things, as well as the increase in the different types of biodiversity in fisheries, they think it's going to be better for the fishing as well as better for the rivers, both rivers, the Aquawaha as well as the St. Johns, but you won't have that concentrated pool. But you have Lake George, you have Crescent Lake and other lakes, so there is a trade-off, you're not going to have that pool. But when fishermen we talk to look at the bigger picture of it being a connected system, many of them have come around because they want to save the St. Johns River as a bass fishing destination.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I wanted to say thank you for coming. My question really has to do with, when you mentioned the Okalaha project, it reminded me that I had attended a meeting perhaps last year where someone had mentioned that there was a fresh spring somewhere along the St. Johns River that is not allowed to contribute to the St. Johns, but that if it were allowed to open up, then it would, introduce a whole bunch of fresh water that would replenish the St. Johns, but also help prevent, the pressure from it would help prevent saltwater intrusion into the St. Johns. Is this a different thing than the Okalaha?
I think, I'm looking at, I think it's the same thing as the Aquawaha. Basically what happens with the Aquawaha is that you get right now Silver Springs flows into the Aquawaha as well as there's 20 springs beneath the pool. They can't flow, they're suppressed under the dam conditions because there's so much water weight on top. And so what happens in times, when the St. Johns River needs more fresh water, all of that spring water that does flow is held back. So none of it gets back because they're maintaining the lake water. So by reducing the pool and allowing all those springs to flow as nature intended it, you get that fresh water that will help on a regular basis. And so you get that fresh water that will offset saltwater intrusion. It's not going to undo all the harm, but it will definitely offset and provide a freshwater source in some areas to offset that plume, the fresh water, the salt water that's going further and further upstream. There are some other springs in the St. Johns that were getting fresh water, so there are definitely some more upstream. There is one, a really popular one called Croker Hole. It's underneath the St. Johns in Little Lake George, further south, and it's a good place to fish. There is some concern that by releasing the springs in the Aquawaha, that flow may adjust a little bit, and that's something that there's being measurements to see if that's the case. But all in all, it looks as if there will be an increase of fresh water getting to the St. Johns, especially the timing of it when it's most important.
So I have a question about the dredging. Have you guys determined what the long-term adverse effect has been, or is happening to Riverkeeper from the?
Yes. I mean, one of the things that we were very concerned about when they dredged the St. Johns River is that when you dredge and deepen the river and you widen it, it gives the Atlantic Ocean more tidal force, so it comes further inland. Every day there's an average of 5 billion gallons of fresh water from the St. Johns trying to get out to the ocean, and there's about 15 billion gallons on average of the Atlantic Ocean trying to come in. So there's a lot of stuff happening there. When you go deeper, you give that Atlantic Ocean more tidal force to come further inland. Over the last 100 years of dredging, the tide range has more than doubled. And so that not only is it tidal further upriver, it's saltier further upriver. When salt water when eelgrass and submerged grasses get exposed to salt water, it needs more light. And that was our big concern about the dredging, was that saltwater intrusion. One thing we didn't anticipate were that the water levels are higher further upriver. When the water levels are higher, then there's less light getting down to the grasses. So at a time that our eelgrass and submerged grasses need more light because of saltwater intrusion, they're getting less light. And we think that's part of the problem. We have better science today than we had when the Army Corps made that decision. The city of Jacksonville's invested in a compound flood model, and one of the things that has surprised them is that the water levels get stacked further upriver than they anticipated. It can't all be blamed on the dredging because we have sea level rise as well, but the compound impacts of sea level rise and dredging has definitely increased water levels, saltwater intrusion, and unfortunately it's worse than we predicted. And I say we. It's worse than what the Army Corps predicted and our fears were. But we have better science today, and our hope is that we won't make the same mistake twice.
And I have a question on the submerged aquatic vegetation. So your enclosed or your controlled environment that it's growing and it's surviving. And do you think it's because of the pressure when it's growing in its wild natural environment, just from the animals that need it to eat it, they're eating it too soon? I think is what you were saying before it can reach maturity. So are they looking to expand this kind of controlled environmental areas to?
So the question is why is it growing inside the enclosures? And I know there are many people who want enclosures in their backyard now. They want to see the grasses. That's been one of the challenges because everybody would like to see it. Except there's some wives that want it. There's some men that want it. Their wives don't want it because it's not the prettiest fence. We believe, based on the research we've done and what we've studied of the agencies that they produce, that the growth rate of the grasses is slower, and so it's succumbing to background grazing pressure. So we're not seeing evidence that there's more wildlife eating all these things, but it's growing slower, so it's getting eaten before it can grow tall and spread. But that's based on limited information. There needs to be more discussion on it. There are some other experiments that are working on people talking together. Another big problem that we have in the St. John's, there's an explosion of tilapia. And tilapia is an invasive fish. And it doesn't necessarily eat eelgrass, but it nibbles on it, it pulls it out to make its beds, but it stirs up the river bottom, and so it's disrupting the river bottom where the grasses grow, as well as getting the water column very turbid and stirred up, so that blocks additional light. There was a photograph just posted this weekend on Facebook of Silver Glen, and the spring run to Silver Glen. It looks like little puck holes all in it. Where the grass should be, there's no grass, but there's all these tilapia beds. And so that's something, I don't know if anyone has an idea of how we can harvest to get rid of these invasive fish. It would be important because it's a big problem. And I know that there's commercial fishermen that are collecting them, as well as gizzard shad. Gizzard shad gets phosphorus out of the waterway, so the Water Management District funds that. But the invasive fish is a real problem too. Yes, sir.
You partially answered my question in regards to salinity levels between the drawdown and the drought, sea level rise, and then didn't know about the dredging. Years ago, I helped my daughter do a science project, and we measured the salinity levels all up and down the St. John's River, down to Blackett. And we were surprised to find that the salinity levels were much higher than the ocean.
Really?
Yes, at the time.
Wow.
I was just wondering if...
What year was that? Do you remember?
let's see, she's 22 now, would have been 10 years ago.
That must have been a drought. It had to be drought conditions for that. I mean, there are some saltwater springs in the Lake George area, so there's some relic saltwater that you can sometimes see registered, but that had to be under drought conditions, which we are seeing some of that today.
Right, but you answered my question in regards to the impact of the salinity levels. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Absolutely. I would, yeah.
Thank you for your contact with the Water Management District. Not that I'm checking up on your brief or anything like that.
That's all right.
You are correct that there are several springs that are covered up by hydraulic weight in the Rodman Reservoir. But we also noticed that after a hurricane, especially in the middle part of the state, where a tremendous amount of water is stored and slowly released into the river, that active springs now kind of slow down their rate because of that hydraulic weight. So obviously, if you draw it down, I don't know how many springs, but there are several, and it actually may have an impact on the aquifer drawing it down a little bit, because all of a sudden you have more holes for it to push water out. But obviously, there's going to be an equilibrium at some point in time. I know Dr. Pinto briefs salinity to the Waterways Commission up in Jacksonville in the areas that he measures. So obviously, if you haven't been paying attention, Monday we changed we issued a severe water shortage order, not an advisory, but an order, which has certain restrictive measures in it. We're pushing the word out to local governments, HOAs are getting letters. In fact, I got my HOA to send out, it's that time of the year, everybody start cleaning your houses and driveways. Ixnay, you can't do that because in our order is, unless it's necessary maintenance, things like pressure washing and just cleaning the water is, can't do it. Also, typically this Sunday, your clocks go ahead at 0200. Everybody gets a second day of irrigation. We're keeping everything at 1 day right now, and this is for the whole lower basin is in this. And the criteria to get a severe water shortage is the two things are rain, and everybody is way behind in their schedules, and the groundwater monitoring wells in the Florida aquifer are in the 15th or 10th percentile, which means it's low. And when we talk about saltwater intrusion, I mean, the aquifer gets low, the pressures of the saltwater are below the aquifer and on the sides. Yeah, saltwater intrusion is something that we don't want to deal with because then the utilities have to do extra filtration and water gets more expensive. So it has an adverse effect and sometimes it's hard. So right now we're just asking everybody, landscaping, what happened this winter, cold, dry, it's pretty easy to see. Everybody's landscape looks a little browner and some things probably are not going to come back. You know, the nurseries and landscapers are probably just waiting for those big paychecks. We're asking, hold up and all that, because you don't want to have this tsunami, I shouldn't use tsunami, but this big bow wave of people watering grass, putting fertilizer up there, and putting in plants in new yards and having to water well. Utilities will monitor their use of the reclaimed water because they can run out of reclaimed water, and they have in their permits they can supplement it with aquifer water. So it's very important that we monitor our things. In the orders, it's very clear. Just be kind if you see somebody violating something. Just kind of remind them we're in a drought. You shouldn't be doing that. It's 1 day. Try to avoid that. Local officials are going to get the letters, the order. We have news. You'll see it in the news. But so that's my question. Is you talk about salinity. Salinity changes a lot of things. When we've had basically a drought since spring of last year, and knock on wood, we're all grateful that we didn't have any hurricanes, but then you had a big refill of the aquifer and the wetlands wasn't there. Now they're saying it's going to be another 3 or 4 months potentially of dry weather, and we could go to another phase, in which case voluntary is going to go to mandatory. And nobody's looking forward to that. The Suwannee River the St. Mary's River is critically low up by Hilliard in its flow. Their springs in the Suwannee River and Chuckie River are really low, so there are impacts in Northeast Florida. We've had it good for so long that we're now facing the brunt of it. But this is not just isolated. All 5 water management districts in the state are in some form of water shortage advisories. You look at the drought index. So this is one of those cycles in 17, 11, 12. This is just a brutal drought. We've grown. There's a lot of pressure on water. So the utilities have to play. This is an all-hands-on-deck evolution. But obviously, very passionate about the SAB. We have tilapia hunts. We have contractors go out, and they're authorized to go harvest tilapia and get them out of the river because they're obviously they damage their flies. Upstream, they have a catfish, it's an Asian catfish, invasive. It's got a shell around it, and they burrow into the riverbanks. I was down there yesterday, and it's just incredible at sea, but a lot of them are dying off because of the drought. So, big deal, but salinity is a lot of things you can study now will impact the river, because it's a slow-moving river, it's just going to stagnate. And that's not good. The farmers are going to start planting, and they're going to want to use water. Deep Creek is probably one of the most polluted tributaries along the river, down in the Tri-County Ag area, big farms. So we have this bow wave at the worst time of people wanting to do things. So to helping Lisa do her passion of protecting the river.
Well, and I do want to underscore what Doug mentioned. If we do all need to do our part to conserve water right now, because it's important that we protect the aquifer, it protects our springs, it protects the rivers. And if you ever are interested, I mean, the St. Johns River Water Management District board meetings are very interesting. They always do a hydraulic report at the beginning to talk about the lake levels and spring levels in river and rainfall. I mean, it's a very informative board meeting you can go to live down in Palatka or watch virtually. So if they make it very easy to participate, and I highly recommend that if you're interested in these issues. And then I also want to do a plug at our website at stjohnsriverkeeper.org. We have all sorts of events coming up. It is springtime. Like I mentioned, the Oyster Fest on the Trout River coming up. We have other fun events. And on April 22nd, we're having the State of Our Watershed. And it's going to be talking about all the work that we're doing as well as others along the St. Johns River. So we'd love to invite you out to mark your calendar for April 22nd. But thank you for inviting me here today, and I'll turn it back over to Maria. Thank you.
And they're a volunteer organization, so if you want to volunteer for the river, or you have kids who need community service hours, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate that. It was extremely informative, and Doug, thank you for talking about the drought. I know we're talking about the irrigation earlier, but you said it's going to remain 1 day a week, even after our time change.
And that's why I do wells too.
And it applies,
Major way
so if you
well,
have a well
well.
to your irrigation system, it's still just 1 day a week. So if you could kind of let your neighbors know that too, if you see them, kindly let them know that. Because a lot of this is just people just don't know. And if you're nice about it and smile, and they understand. So, okay, so our next month's meeting again is with our school board representatives. We'll have Dr. Werner, who is our superintendent, and April Carney, who is our representative. So make sure you mark your calendar for that. April Fool's Day. It's not a real Fool's Day joke. They're really going to be here, I hope. Right? They're supposed to be here. Okay, so one last request. I know we have a very small group, but if those who are able, they can help us stack the chairs, we will be out of here very quickly. So thank you very much.